this is totally unfair. I've always thought, there was a point about a decade ago when people like Will Hutton used to tell you that you had to have a written constitution in order to grow up, to which the only answer was Russia, which had a wonderful constitution, which was a pretty awful place to live in. So what was grown up about having that kind of constitution, as opposed to our, I mean, the British constitution depends on the institutions, things like the civil service, institutions like the BBC, that keep it in a way decent. You have to ask, what are the institutions that keep us decent? It seems to be a much more interesting question than is the constitution. Yeah. Can I come back to smaller Britain? Because it is, because Peter, and I wanted to ask Ian this, Peter said, well, perhaps we'll feel smaller, but in lots of ways, of course, we feel bigger. If you go to the East End of London, it feels as if it relates to other places more than it relates to us now. Those don't look like communities that are absolutely set on assimilating in any straightforward way. So the Scandinavian, snowy social democrat future, where we get things, where all the things, the rights that we, I think, feel are very important, would be easy to go on doling out, doesn't look so easy. So smaller Britain, but more troubled?
Well, I mean, I said small in the sense that it might eventually relinquish its kind of imperial memory.
Yes.
And I suppose it's doing that now in various ways. And I think there's, within Britain, within this country, I mean, London and the South East, but especially London alone, seems to be drawing away from the rest. And it has more a kind of climate and a kind of culture of a city-state within Britain. And you'll often hear people, I'm often amused when I hear them say, I'm not British or English, because being English was a terrible thing to be for about 20 years. We used to go to terrible lengths to avoid saying I'm English. Oh, my grandmother comes from Aberdeen, or we're a Yorkshire family, really. And I hear people saying, I'm not English, I'm not British, I'm a Londoner. That's especially fashionable in certain kinds of literary circles. And what it speaks for, I think, is the kind of need to be seen as multicultural, to have friendships outside this country, not to be part of the kind of St George's Cross, English football supporting ordinary man and woman in Essex kind of thing. So there is, but there isn't, I think there's a reality that also says that London is becoming different, has become different in the last 20 years, mainly through the citification of the economy. I mean, which is a huge thing, I think. And, you know, people talk about rebalancing the economy. Well, terrific, but I can't see much sign of it. And that money and that power preserves London as a very, very powerful world city, which is not true of the rest of the country. I don't think you live in Newcastle, you don't feel you're part of this great, powerful world economy in the way that you do if you're in London. And of course, I mean, people, you know, on my bus home every night, or my bus from wherever I'm going, number 19, I mainly hear non-English voices. I mean, I hear many languages, some of which I can't identify. That wouldn't have been true 20 years ago, probably because of the mobile phone, because these people are talking to Krakow or Ljubljana or wherever, Somalia, as well as people in Hackney. So, but there's suddenly a much more visible thing, much oral and visible, is the immigrant population of London. So, yes, smaller, but more confused, more turbulent, or more vibrant, which is the favourite New Labour word for this. It's more vibrant, it's not more turbulent and chaotic, which it sometimes is. It's kind of more vibrant, more friendly, more forward-looking. I'm not sure how I feel about it. It depends who's on the 19 bus, I think. I change from vibrancy to turbulence in the switch of mobile phone. But yeah.
No, I mean, interesting that Ian mentioned Newcastle. I was brought up in London, but my father lost his job in the early 60s, got a new job on the Tyneside, so I finished my school up on the Tyneside, and I go back. And I think it's just wrong about Newcastle. When I moved up in the early 60s, I think it seemed much more remote from the rest of Britain. A lot of people then, the older people, had never been outside the northeast. And I don't think that's true now. And now, if you go down to the sort of Tyneside, down to the riverside in Newcastle, which was 40 years ago a sort of shabby, unpleasant, dangerous place, is now a very cosmopolitan place, very much linked in to the culture of the rest of England stroke Britain. Let me make one other point, which sort of comes out of this, and it relates to your point, Ian, about London. Again, I disagree with you. Well, I half agree with you. I think London is becoming different. But I disagree with you in this sense, that I don't think it's either or. And I think the issue of identity, and perhaps this is one of the great challenges for us all, is that identities should not be exclusive, and it is the attempt to make identity exclusive which leads to the BNP and so on. I'm a Londoner, and I'm English, and I'm British, and I'm European, and I'm an Arsenal supporter, and I love the, and I watch the X Factor, and I'm a man. I mean, why can't one have all these identities? And I think that, one of the things, and this is quite irrespective of whether Scotland becomes independent or not, but it does speak to the issue of immigration. And I think London is what, compared with when I first came to London from university at the end of the 60s, I think London is a much better, much more exciting place because of the variety. I don't like the word multicultural because it's now got sort of, it's now got its own a number of meanings, but just the variety of people, cuisine, theatre, music, language, I just think makes London an infinitely more attractive city now than it was 40 years ago. And actually, immigration is one of the great success stories of London, and I think the rest of Britain. I mean, yes, there are problems, and yes, there is as well resistance, but if one goes back to the Notting Hill riots of the 50s, or the Brixton riots of the early 80s, or Toxteth, or Birmingham, we just don't have that nowadays. You have Enoch Powell type people, but the proximate events that gave rise to Powellism in the late 60s don't occur. So I'm an optimist about this. I think not only that you're wrong, but I think in the sense, where I think I'm right and he's wrong is that I'm not into I observe something which I think is on the whole wonderful, but I'm actually optimistic about what it means for the future.